meeting is being recorded.
Okay then. I would like to introduce Taylor and Jen. They're going to be our MCs for the day. Sure, everybody that you go down to the interpretation globe, choose English or Spanish.
Hello. So yes, thanks everyone. We would ask that you would choose English or Spanish, one or the other. Please don't ignore. Closed captioning will also be available, and it can be activated by the caption bar at the bottom for anyone who wants it.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Taylor Crisp. Welcome to the 2023 Advocacy Days. We are here. Happy New Year. I am the Spokane County Parent Coalition self-advocate here at the ARC of Spokane.
Hi, and I am Jennifer Ranney. I am the Director of Advocacy and Family Support at the ARC of Spokane.
I'm excited to help co-facilitate this year's Advocacy Days, especially after having such a successful legislative session last year. And I am pleased and thankful to work alongside all of you and have another even more successful year of policy change. I reside in Spokane County. I live in the 5th legislative district. I have autism, and I am a mother of a 9-year-old girl who has autism and ADHD and other sensory processing needs. We have a strong agenda for today. We will have a bunch of us speaking on topics regarding supported living, housing for people with IDD, community living, and the closing of Rainier, education, employment services, and supports, and community inclusion services, TEFRA waivers, and so much more.
And so just to kind of get us kicked off, we were thinking about doing a poll here. Diana, are you ready for that? So our first poll is, do you know your legislative district? And by the way, it's okay to say if you don't know as well.
For the host purposes, there was on the chat line from the interpreter. If you could slow down just a little bit, it'd be great.
Absolutely.
All right.
And here are your results.
All right.
Okay. Looks like most people are coming from districts 41 through 49. Welcome.
Yes, welcome. I'm glad to see a bunch of people from all districts here participating. So now we're going to get on with the rest of the program for today. And next we have Ken Larson and Jessica Renner speaking on the closing of Rainier and community building. So take it away, you two.
So I'll go first, but I don't have kids on, so I'll go first. My name is Jessica Renner. I am a self-advocate. I live in the 33rd Legislative District. I am the mobilization manager for self-advocates and leadership sale. I am here today to speak about the significant need to build up the community with housing so people can get out of institutions. The governor's capital budget shows $176 million for the Fircrest Nursing Facility, $6.4 million to replace the roofs of the cottage at Rainier, and millions of dollars for repairs to Lakeland Village. We need to take the money invested in these institutional repairs and invest it into communities so that people can live as independent as possible with the proper support supporting them. People being isolated has gone on long enough. Getting people out of institutions into community housing is long overdue, and we need to close our HCs once and for all. Before I end today, I want to invite you all to attend the Sale Close Our HCs rally on the steps of the Capitol and on Zoom January 25th, 2023 from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. We will have both legislators and advocates speak on the importance of closing institutions. We need everyone's support, so please join us. Thank you.
And I'll interrupt here just a second. Ken Larson emailed me and said that he's having computer issues and couldn't be here today. So Sean Latham is going to step in for him.
Hey everyone.
Hello everyone. I think I'm subbing in for Ken today. My name is the Director of Allies and Advocacy, a nonprofit fighting for the civil rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I am here today with Jessica to urge you and everyone you know to advocate to your legislators about 3 important factors for people to live successfully in the community rather than outdated large facilities like the IDD institutions. Those are safe, accessible community housing that people with disabilities can get into. Second is community services. We have 13,000 people on the waiting list and more people receiving inadequate services. And the third key factor is that we need a healthy, robust workforce. We must ensure that being a provider is a sustainable profession. Too often we see providers remain grossly underfunded and overworked. So over and over we see the turnover rate for providers go up instead of down. We need to see that change. How, you might ask? First, we must expand safe community housing options by securing $40 million, just 10% of housing dollars, to provide housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Second, our legislature must fully fund services and adjust rates to build and sustain the service network. Third, we must invest in well-paid, well-supported caregiving workforce to ensure a delivery system. Fourth, we must end the over-reliance on using large facilities like IDD institutions, hospitals, to house adults and youths with developmental. These places do not give the individual the ability to lead full lives. I encourage you to join me and Jessica next Wednesday on the 25th on the Capitol steps to tell our legislators. We need to urge them to step up to make the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you so much, Jessica. Really appreciate that. We are going to turn it over to Stacy Dim regarding homes for people with IDD.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to see so many people. We have over 70 people now. This is really wonderful. So as you go in to talk with your legislators tonight, I wanted to just give you some talking points and some frame around the issue of housing for people with developmental disabilities. As many of you know, we have not had a very large scale housing initiative that meets the needs of people with developmental disabilities since the 80s, when we were largely deinstitutionalizing. When the Housing Trust Fund was developed for specialized housing for low-income groups, there was a DD set-aside created, but we've only over the last several years gotten about $3 to $5 million every biennium. So that just builds us a handful of houses every biennium, and that has caused a big gap in the amount of housing inventory that meets the needs of our community for people when they live outside their family home. So we are working hard, have been working hard this last year to really explain to Commerce and the low-income housing world and to legislators and the governor's office why we need a very large investments in a very specific way. So I just want to remind everybody, you probably know this, that a lot of people with developmental disabilities rely on SSI as their primary source of income, which means that they live on less than $900 a month. Often they're only allotted about $200 a month to go toward rent. And as you can imagine, there's not very many places that you can live in that amount. Even when we have places that are designed for people who are low income, we fall in a really special group. It's called extremely low income under the federal category. It's also sometimes referred to as below 30% average mean income, so AMI. And that is an extremely low income group that isn't even accounted for in a lot of affordable or low income housing projects. In addition, sometimes the environments in these really large complexes that get built for senior housing or veterans housing, housing that supports people who may have behavioral health challenges, a lot of times our folks don't do that great in those really large environments. There's not often room for a care provider. There's not often really good space for people to live. And so we don't often fit in well, even when there are set aside units for people with disabilities. Really great housing developers will say, well, we want to help you with your housing situation. Where do you want us to build 600 units for people with developmental disabilities? And then we have to say, well, you know, by the time you add in services, that feels like an institution. So we need what's called in the housing world scattered site housing. That are large single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, nestled in the community, so it feels like it's part of the community. And it serves somewhere between 1 and 6 people oftentimes. As you know, we have a complicated funding system for residential support systems. And so when you combine that, we look at adult family home models, shared living models, supported living, SOLAs. There are a lot of different ways that we fund residential services to support people. And there are housing models that sort of match up with those funding models as well. And so when we talk about just the brick and mortar to legislators, we like to say we want to make sure that we get a big investment in a set aside for people with developmental disabilities, and maybe in the housing trust fund. Many of you know we had some capital money come out of the Dan Thompson account for housing. In addition, you know, it'd be okay to set up another fund that was designated for housing, as long as it says for people with developmental disabilities. And there's a recognition that it serves people that are below 30% AMI. And what that helps us do is cap rents so people can afford where they live. And we get housing that meets the needs of our folks. Another problem that we have when we look at sort of the larger housing models for specialized groups is that the developers that develop our housing often rely on tax credits to build these big units. We're not usually eligible for that because our housing is smaller and it serves just a few people. It doesn't perform well by Commerce's standards, and it doesn't usually let the developer get access to tax credits. So we've been asking that Commerce be allowed to provide the funding that would be for DD housing in the form of grants, not loans. And that's really, really important. That's because these developers can't charge enough rent to pay back their loans, and they can't take advantage of the tax credits. So we won't have enough developers to even use the money if we get it, if we're not careful about that. And we want to make sure that within that grant structure, right, it always serves people with developmental disabilities. They can put that language in there. So those are some critical pieces of what we want to talk to legislators about. Right now, the governor's office has a big $400 million housing package that includes a referendum. So the public would have to approve of this larger package generally in November. We're part of that, and there is a DD set aside within that larger package. It's for $25 million. $15 million of it would be part of the referendum, which is all a good thing. I think you will see in the coming weeks, in addition, another bill that just puts $20 million toward DD housing, and another bill that might look at a tax structure from another tax that gives us specific money for housing. That's the brick and mortar. Keep in mind when you talk to legislators that when we talk about housing for people with developmental disabilities, there are 3 parts. So the brick and mortar part, the residential supports, and the workforce. When we talk about the capital budget, we're just talking about the brick and mortar. When we look at the operating budget, we talk about residential services and rates so that we have an adequate workforce. And that's kind of how that breaks down. So that's a brief overview of housing. I hope that gives you some good information when you go into your groups, and let me know if you have any questions.
All right. Thank you for that, Stacy. That was very well spoken and on point.
Excuse me,
Okay.
Taylor, it's just one quick thing for any speakers. The interpreters has asked people to slow down a bit so they can keep caught up. And it also helps other people on this call that needs better understanding. So to slow down and take their time a little bit. Thanks.
Yes, Kyle. So up next, we have Scott Livingood on supported living. And again, as Kyle and the interpreter reminded, please speak a little slower so those can all be able to listen and hear and on everything. All right, take it away, Scott.
Right, thank you. I thought Stacy spoke very slowly, so I may need some warning signs to slow down because I'm used to testifying at a rapid pace. So I am Scott Livingood. I am from Alpha Supported Living Services. We provide services in King, Snohomish, and Spokane counties, and I'm here representing CRSA, the statewide association, as their legislative chair, and I live in the 45th district. So a little bit about supported living. It's a critical model of long-term care in our communities, supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the states, most receiving 24/7 in-home supports. So there are over 140 agency providers statewide, currently serving around 4,500 individuals in supported living, community protection, group homes, group training homes, and children's out-of-home services. As most of you know, supported living received a historic rate increase last year. And so we're so appreciative of this community coming together to make sure that came to reality. That 23% increase to the ISS cost center, which is the rate component for direct care compensation, that helped to stabilize supported living providers after going through the pandemic, seeing our open shifts increase significantly and turnover, which, as you've heard me say over and over again, has hovered around 50% annually for the last 6 years, skyrocketed to 78% in 2021. So this rate increase allowed agencies to raise starting wages to a competitive level, resulting in turnover returning to around 50%, open positions starting to be filled, and agencies starting to look at referrals once again. So take a moment, and can you imagine that we are touting a success of returning to 50% turnover once again? This rate increase was not the solution or the magic pill. It stopped the bleeding, it steadied those boats as we weathered that storm. Agencies continue to struggle to hire enough staff to begin to serve new clients. It should be noted that over the last 2.5 years, agencies needed to concentrate on the clients they were serving, that they were able to support, as they were unable to fill vacancies or look at referrals for the last 2.5 years. Some providers even needed to consolidate due to workforce shortages. As a result, the number of individuals served in supported living has decreased. Prior to the pandemic, almost 4,700 individuals were served in community residential, meaning that over the last 2.5 years, over 200 fewer individuals are being served in supported living and other community residential services. It should also be noted that as of the end of 2022, SOLA programs are now funded twice as high as supported living, at over $1,100 per client per day compared to supported living's $570. while the RHCs are over 2.5 times the cost at over $1,400 per client per day. As the state, families, advocates, and all of you look to supported living with the impending closure of Pat C at Rainier School, it's imperative we continue to invest in the community and fund provider rate increases for supported living. To further stabilize agencies, continue to address this workforce recruitment challenge, and keep pace with other industries who are able to offer higher wages, such as fast food, retail, and those state-operated programs, we are seeking the following 2 provider rate increases this session. An 8.6 provider rate increase effective July of this year, and then another one the following July, a cost of living increase of 2.5%. It's hoped that with these rate increases, agencies will be able to continue to bring turnover down, fill staffing vacancies, and bring new clients into services. Without rate increases, the only thing guaranteed is that supported living will actually experience a 5.4% reduction over the next 18 months, as the remaining COVID-19 enhanced rates will slowly be phased out. But once again, the only thing guaranteed for us right now is that our funding will reduce by 5.4% over the next 18 months. This would further destabilize providers as we are being looked at to serve people moving out of the RHCs, individuals coming out of their family's home, and serving others to live in the community with supports. The other focus, Stacy already outlined, we are focusing on the capital budget as well to make sure there is housing available for people. So to increase the allocation to $40 million and to move the funding to a grant rather than a deferred loan. So again, you've heard this a few times. We welcome you to join us on the 25th for a rally to tell our story. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was incredible information. And I would love to turn it over now to Brandy Mons, who will be discussing the workforce.
Hi, everyone. This is Brandy Mons from the Developmental Disability Council. I'm coming to you from Olympia, Washington. And I just want to give a quick shout out to one of the attendees under the name of Brian Dahl. There is a room 2 floors below me full of Developmental Disability Council members that are sitting together watching this presentation. So thank you all for coming today. I was asked to talk with you about the workforce crisis that we're facing, and you've heard a little bit about it just from Scott as well as Stacy around housing and helping people live in their homes. And I am fortunate enough to talk between Scott, who focuses on helping people in their homes, and I believe the next person up is Courtney, who's going to talk about helping people keep their jobs. And those are 2 very obvious workforce groups that we need in our community in order to continue to live in the community. As you folks know, there has been this global health crisis called a pandemic. And we were having trouble before the pandemic, but as Scott just told you, as a result of the pandemic, we've had some really significant hits to our workforce. We had a large group of people, also known as the baby boomers, several of whom said, I don't want to go back to work, or I can't go back to work during this health crisis. We lost a large number of people to that issue. We lost a large number of people because the cost of everything has gone up with inflation as a result of the pandemic, and we are not paying people enough to live. In King County, for example, you cannot earn enough money and work in our field, helping people live in their homes, to pay your rent. So we are losing people desperately. And as Scott has said, we have lost the capacity to even serve the people who are in our system now. That does not speak to all of the new people who are coming in. So for example, last year we passed this really cool bill in our state to get services to students coming out of the education system. But what we're hearing from the employment workforce system as well as the residential system is that they can't take new people on because they don't have enough staff to even serve the people that are currently enrolled in their programs. And I've been working in this field since 1997, and I have never heard people say, I can't take on anyone new because I don't have enough staff to serve the people who need my services already. So it's a really significant issue. As you've heard Scott say and Stacy say, there are some solutions. For example, in the proviso budget, in what the governor is suggesting. I would suggest you folks think about creative solutions to the workforce crisis, aside from paying people a living wage, and talk to your elected officials about what you think would help our field. We know that we don't have enough people right now to do the work, and coming up with some new solutions and giving them ideas about what those could be, I think would be really enlightening and helpful. We know, for example, technology is a really cool solution for a lot of people who don't need someone with them all the time. We learned that as a result of the pandemic. And so what do you think technology could help with yourself or your loved one in terms of changing the way that we support each other, and also enabling people to become more independent in their community? So like I said, I was asked to talk about workforce, and I love that I'm in between the residential speaker, Scott, and the employment speaker coming up, Courtney. And I would encourage you folks to talk with your elected officials about helping pay living wages, helping offer training so people want to stay in this work that is extremely hard to do, but also any creative solutions or ideas you have for what
Seems like Brandy might have frozen. Is that the case for everybody?
Yes.
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 Let's wait just one more second.
Yes, and it looks like she's probably having technical difficulties at her end, wherever she's calling from.
Diana, we might want to move on to the next speaker and have Brandy finish up her thoughts when she can get back in. There we go. Oh, Taylor and Jennifer, it's probably okay to move on to the next speaker.
All right, sounds good. All right, we're gonna move on to our next speaker, and that's going to be Courtney Williams on employment supports. So take it away, Courtney.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am losing my voice intermittently. I'm not sick. I think it's just maybe the world is telling me to stop talking so much. That might be it. So thank you so much for putting this on. I'm hearing so many both disheartening and encouraging things from our fellow community members. My name is Courtney Williams. I'm the Executive Director for the Community Employment Alliance. I'm being reminded to slow down. So if you can't, just keep reminding me if I'm going to go too fast. Brandy did an excellent job of kind of catching you up on where employment is as of today, but I'm going to provide just some further context. So last year, the legislative session was monumental. The community of advocates worked really tirelessly and accomplished so much. And for that, on behalf of CEA, I want to say thank you. Part of our legislative polls for last session were 2 legislative priorities: statewide school to work, which because of a lot of your support, we got it passed to the finish line. So thank you. And then a rate increase. So what had happened is employment service providers in the pandemic really hit a wall, like most of you. It became really clear that quality of services were at risk, if at all. And the capacity of providers began feeling a bit stretched. And so really looking at what can we do to retain quality staff to ensure Washington State ranks #1 in the nation for another decade when it comes to service outcomes. And it comes down to a rate. Employment service providers had not had an adequate rate increase without the adjustable 2% on occasion since 2011. And we asked for the legislature to consider giving us a rate increase based off the consumer price index. So roughly that means just competitive rates based off of the time. And so last year it was 2022. So rather than getting the rate increased in the legislature, what the legislature did do is remove the rate increase from our bill and instead directed the agency, which in this case is DDA, so the Developmental Disability Administration, to conduct a rate study through their research department. And so if you don't know who that is, it would be Dr. Mancuso. And I'm sure some of you are going to have interactions with him in the future because of various rate studies. And I'll just say he is creme de la creme. What Dr. Mancuso's rate study concluded, and it concluded in October, and we've sent all the information, but if you need it again, we will be sure to get that to Diana so that she can send it, is that the rate is adequate and is not adequately funded at this time. And so Dr. Mancuso was proposing a significant rate increase to catch us up so that we can maintain quality of services. The department then, being DDA, encouraged us by putting us in the decision package for the first time. And what a decision package, and I'm sure you all know, but for those who don't, and it always helps me to educate myself and re-educate myself, is the agency, so DSHS and DDA, say these are the things we want to see in the budget this year, submits that to the governor. The governor, however, did not fully fund the rate increase. So last month we found out that the governor, rather than the 189 million, which was recommended in the general fund, there's a federal match to that as well. He recommended 41 million. So you could see that's about 30% of a rate, and not adequate enough for us to be able to sustain our services, which again, we're preaching to the choir. So at this time, CEA is looking at getting a line item to compensate what the governor's budget did not include, so that in 2024, 2025, we can provide concurrent services fully. We can provide statewide school to work fully. There doesn't need to be a capacity issue. The fear of individuals having an ever-changing door of job coaches does not have to be a reality. Job coaches who want a career and actual paid to be working as hard as they do will be able to do that. And so this is what we're seeking, and we're hopeful we can continue to support and work with you all on getting this to the finish line. We have some good legislator support, but we're going to need more, like all of you. And so CEA is happy to support and testify and sign in when we're able to, and when it's applicable. And that's all I have to say regarding what we're asking for as of now. And I know Brandy did a great job. She left off some things, so I'm hopeful if there's any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you so much, Diana, and everybody for being here.
Thank you. That was absolutely incredible information. And actually, as I have a background in workforce development, everything that you guys were talking about was so meaningful, and we completely understand. So thank you for sharing that before we go into some of those breakouts later tonight. So it looks like right now we are running just a little bit early. There is time for a break. Stacy, did you want to just do a 10-minute break, or did you want to expand this any longer?
Let's do a 10-minute break, and then we have an additional speaker that was able to attend. So let's fit them in, and I'll send you the information.
Perfect. All right. Well, everybody, we will see you back here at, it looks like 2:48 or 2:50, whatever works best for you. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in a few.
Thanks, Jennifer. For the person that just came in, we're just letting you know we're on a 10-minute break, and we'll be returning at 2:48.
for the person that just came in. We're on a 10-minute break. We'll be back at about 2:48.
Hey, Mike G. G, 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 G.
What do you want, Kyle?
Oh, saying up you up to no good as usual while we're on break.
Well, I had to tell somebody we were on break because this, what can I say? They let you in? Oh my God, they let you in? Oh
Hey,
my
Miss
goodness, they let
Bisbee.
you in? Oh my goodness.
Of course not.
Maybe I need to talk to Diane to see if. No, I'm kidding.
Stupid wireless. While I'm waiting, I'm just gonna do something. About 2 minutes ago, folks.
Good morning, Kyle.
right, folks, are we ready to come back?
Anytime you are.
I'm here.
All right. Jennifer and Taylor, who's up next in the queue?
I think Jen is, or yeah. No, or is it me?
Okay, well, I'm glad everyone is back. We've got the big show to still go on. So with that, we are going to turn it over to Katrina Davis and Erin Devine, I hope I pronounced that correctly, regarding children stuck in the hospital or sent out of state. So please take it away. We're excited to hear about this.
Hello, can you hear me okay? This is Katrina Davis.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. I got volume on. All right, so hi everybody. Katrina Davis, I'm a parent and a family advocate. I work at Seattle Children's Emergency Department. I'm also the parent of a 23-year-old young man who's autistic. I really just want to take a moment to thank you for allowing me and my parent colleague who's going to speak after me an opportunity to share a difficult situation happening in our community right now, and one that I'm so grateful that we can put a spotlight on this. So I'm going to share what happened to my son. Oh, so by the way, I'm in the 37th district. Okay, I'm going to share what happened to my son and my family, and what I see, unfortunately and sadly, every day in my job as a case manager for patients with profound IDD and autism at Seattle Children's Emergency Department.
Real quick, can we slow down, please, for the
Oh,
interpreter?
sorry, I'm a
It's
fast
okay.
talker.
It's okay.
Thank you for telling. Oh, I said I can be obnoxious. I will slow down. Thank you. So as a case manager, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've been witnessing and some trends I'm seeing for this population. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened to my son. So I'll put on my parent hat and tell you about Arthur. Arthur is autistic. And please know that I asked Arthur in a way that I think he could understand if I share his and our family story about what happened to him and his unique challenges. So he gave me permission and consent. So I just want to say thank you to Arthur for sharing what happened to you. And your very difficult reality in life raises awareness, and hopefully it'll open some hearts and minds. And what we really hope is this will enact change, meaningful change for people like Arthur at a time when we really need it the most. So you've heard the expression, you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Well, you know, Arthur's particular type of autism is he has profound high needs autism. He has limited communication ability, intellectual impairment, low adaptive skills, and significant challenging behaviors in the form of aggression. He will unsafe bolting or wandering from the home, limited self-awareness, limited safety awareness. He can experience self-injury in the form of headbanging or punching his face or biting his hand. He will also show aggression in the form of punching, hitting, kicking, pulling hair. And he does, when he gets dysregulated or has meltdowns, he experiences significant property destruction, making our home a very unsafe place to be and a very unhappy place for him. So Arthur will require lifelong line of sight care. So I'll cut to the chase about our family. Arthur went for a very long time without vital services, upstream, so to speak. So services such as the DDA waiver services, you know, caregivers, respite, habilitation, access to recreation, community participation, these were all things this young man could not access for a reason I'll tell you in a minute. There's many reasons, that's why we're all here today, but he also went without some of the Medicaid or insurance covered services for this population, such as behavior supports, what you may have heard of applied behavior analysis or positive behavior supports. He wasn't receiving that, any mental health services. He didn't have a medication management provider. And he was out of school for 2 years because they could not accommodate him. And believe me, we got some nonprofit attorneys involved in all that, but all this to say this young man went without services for a long time and went into significant depression, isolation, and dysregulation in the form of some pretty amazing and epic meltdowns that made home life very unsafe for him and us. And I have a very high tolerance and resistance, and I think I'm pretty good at keeping my son loved and cared for and safe, he exceeded what we could offer safely in the family home. So we went to the emergency department between his 16th and 17th year 12 times. And every time we were sent home because there was no safe place for him to go. Actually, he was 17 and our inpatient unit at Children's stops at age 17. And the adult facilities will not take people with profound intellectual disability due to their high adaptive and their high needs. He ended up in our home unsafe, often over medicated to keep him safe, and very, very, very traumatic time. I mean, I can feel my cheeks getting hot thinking about how traumatic that was to really feel like there was no place for him to go. So we had to activate Medicaid for out-of-state placement. We activated DDA for anything they had, and we tried to get the school to place him outside the state for residential educational. He ended up at Faircrest in RHC. That's the one option that we had at the time. This was a while ago. I will be honest with you, Arthur remains without many of these same services. And luckily, we just got a little lucky. He's regulated, and we're doing our best to meet his needs and understand what he's trying to tell us. I want to state really clearly that the reasons these services are not available for this population is complex. Waiver services exist, ABA exists, special ed exists, but for this particular high needs population with significant challenging behaviors, the providers and staff and agencies who serve our IDD population don't always have the skill, expertise, or comfort level with this population. And there's really no incentive to serve them differently. They don't get paid more or trained properly, so that people like my son and my family go without the vital services that would help him be included in his community. So that's Arthur's story. I'm happy to give more information. I want to keep it short and sweet to allow time for our next parent who's going to share her similar story. I'm not looking at the chat. I turned off I'm not even looking at anybody. So if you have questions or comments, I'll look at it afterwards. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my job. So as a family advocate, case manager at Seattle Children's Emergency Department.
Sorry to interject. Interpreter asked for us just slow down again. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know what it is about my fast talking.
It's your passion.
I'll slow down. Thank you. Okay. So as a case manager serving these families and these individuals in crisis, my job is to focus solely on our IDD, DDA enrolled individuals who are experiencing significant challenging behaviors or such high needs that they're not safe in the family home. Children's is currently in a code yellow, our emergency department, which is the code used for high census. That's the code you see in natural disasters like earthquakes or mass casualty events. And a huge percentage of these spike in admissions are DDA, IDD, severely impacted individuals who are unsafe in the family home and the parents have nowhere else to go. We have children that technically meet discharge, but they're boarding in our ED, and you cannot blame those parents for not picking them up. They're not confident they're going to get the services they need when they take their child home, and because the history has proved that's not happening. And they're just afraid for their child's safety. It's actually a very loving act when they don't pick their child up because there's nothing else to do. So I'm in a lot of meetings with DDA, with Medicaid, with school districts, with CPS, and we're talking about what do we do? Where these kiddos go when their families, and this is relevant, by the way, for children, teens, and adults. I just happen to work with children. This is happening all across the lifespan. It's either they return home and the cycle continues and there's bad things that happen, very unsafe, sad things that happen, robbing the person of their dignity and respect, in my opinion. That's like sending home a very sick person. Or they stay in the hospital, which is the most restrictive environment you can imagine. Windowless emergency departments are not community-based options. Or they are sent out of state, paid for by Medicaid or our school districts. And if there's also sometimes DDA will find a place, but DDA is not a crisis nor service, nor do they serve a lot of these high needs individuals because their needs exceed what DDA can successfully provide right now. So I think I'm spotlighting a really sad and desperate situation. The word I hear from parents a lot is unethical. They can't believe this is happening. This is their loved one, and there's no place to go. So stuck in the hospital, I say it a lot, and I hope that we can turn our sights to how we seek community-based placements, safe, long-term therapeutic, safe, short-term therapeutic, whatever the person needs to get the help they need so they can return to the community. Sometimes home and community is not safe. We have to create safe places for them to be. And I'm not talking about RHCs. I'm talking about intermediate facilities, placement services where they can still be in the community, but get the safety and the therapeutic intensity of supports they need. So I'm just going to look at my notes to make sure I said everything before I punt it to Aaron. I think I'll end with, I hope people know that, it's hard for me to talk about my son's challenges. I don't like to air this, but I don't think the world's going to know unless we talk about this unique population and their significant challenges. My colleague Andrea Condon is on the North Star Committee, and I know she's probably a broken record talking about this. We are aging parents, and when the behaviors exceed what we can do safely, or if our children aren't supported and they exceed what we need, we can't access the services, they do go into crisis, and this is where we're struggling. All right, I'll just say that parents like me, we really want our children in the community. I didn't want my son in RHC, but it was the only safe place to keep him. It shouldn't be an option. We need community-based, safe placements where the intensity of supports are available and our kids aren't denied, and they're being denied. And we need more support on the horizon. We need more hope on the horizon. I'm seeing a lot of folks who are traumatized, and there's nothing worse to look in a parent's eyes, including my own, and just know the despair and the fear you feel that you can't keep your child safe just because their behaviors are really a manifestation of their disability. I won't live forever. I have to trust that the goodness of humanity, but also mandates and laws and policies and funding will create services for this population. So again, thank you for the opportunity for me to talk about this, for caring about people like my son with IDD and our families. And to our self-advocates here today, thank you for seeking to understand and representing the unique needs of people like Arthur, who often require the intensity of supports currently not available to them. You've worked so hard to get so many supports on board for our people. Let's really work hard to get some unique services and supports for this population that's languishing. For the reasons that we're lacking all these services up and downstream, our people are in constant health harming crisis, isolated, excluded, and frankly, feeling pretty hopeless. Thanks again. I'll put my contact information in the chat. Thanks again for the opportunity. I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Erin, but I don't know if somebody else is going to introduce her. Erin Dawson is a parent who's got a little story to share too.
All right, take it away, Erin.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity, first of all. And this is very vulnerable for me to be sharing. So I hope that I'm received with open ears. And here's kind of our story about Stuck in Hospital. My name, as I said, is Erin Dawson. I live in Kirkland. This summer, our family was in crisis. My son was stuck in the hospital for 47 days. Ryan, my amazing son, is 23. He has a rare chromosome deletion and high needs autism, accompanied with intellectual impairment. The world is overwhelming for our son. Sorry, technical challenges. And when he becomes anxious and dysregulated, he experiences significant challenging behavior, and we are not able to keep him safe in our home. Ryan requires full assistance for all aspects of his life. He can never be left alone. He needs help with personal hygiene, food preparation, and other life skills. Our son has many gifts and talents. Ryan's amazing. He's the most incredible human being I know. He's got savant-like understanding of computer technology, the same ill is also a cause of anguish, and it tends to be the largest trigger for serious aggression, outbursts, all directed at our family in the form of hitting, kicking, and property damage. When triggered, Ryan also self-harms in the form of headbanging, and last summer, trying to overdose on medication. He'll bolt away from us into traffic with no regard to safety. His 14-year-old brother has experienced significant trauma. He loves his brother, but it's very difficult to run to your room every day and lock your door to be safe. The inability to keep Ryan safe in school and in our home has resulted in police involvement. Our son's challenging behaviors are not a crime. They're a manifestation of his profound developmental disability. Ryan also struggles with sleep disturbance and food obsessions. We haven't had a good night's sleep probably since the day he's been born. Vital services offered through developmental administration and Medicaid do exist, but they're almost impossible to access. That's another story. For individuals like Ryan who have autism with intellectual impairment and who experience significant challenging behavior. When Ryan is unsafe, we're told to call 911, which we have done many times, or bring him to the closest emergency department. We did do that this summer, and Ryan ended up stuck in the hospital for 47 days. And I understand that's much shorter than many people like Ryan who've been in there for months and longer. Ryan, keep in mind, was on an ortho floor, contained to his room that entire time. Ryan was unable to return to our family home because we do not have the services and supports to keep him safe. And there are no intermediate care facilities in Washington for our IDD population. He can't come home, and there isn't anything in the community-based services that would provide the support, the intensity of supports, therapy, and structure that Ryan needs for safety, and most importantly, to help him improve. Like so many individuals like Ryan, he ended up stuck in a hospital, which was very restrictive and traumatizing experience for him and our family and everybody who knows and loves Ryan. It's frustrating, as you can probably see, and heartbreaking, which I'm sure you can also see, to watch the agencies who are intended to help people like Ryan tell us that they don't have the services, or they're not available for him, or he doesn't fit the programs that do exist. Everyone ends up pointing to each other, and it's kind of like a, you take care of it, and we get nowhere. With all of this going on, Ryan was, as I said, stuck in the hospital for 47 days, declining, as you can imagine. He did end up being moved over to a residential habilitation facility for Crest. When I say that, I do want to put that personal touch is I feel very vulnerable that I do not want to be judged as a parent and how much I love my child, but that is the only option that we had to keep Ryan safe. That was it. This was the only in-state option that we had as well. Fortunately, we can see Ryan as often as we like, and we do often, all the time. But the alternative was Medicaid paying for residential placement, which in our state means that he would have gone out of state. We did not want Ryan, who's never been away from home until this, thousands of miles away from us, his family and his community. What would have prevented Ryan from being placed ultimately in an RHC? Children, teens, and adults with intellectual impairment who experience significant challenging behaviors and who require a higher level of care than we can provide safely in our home desperately need community-based placements so our loved ones can receive the intensity of services, supports, and therapies required for improvement and stabilization. Ryan deserves to get the care he needs as a member of our community and not left to be hidden or ignored in the midst of this broken system. Ryan isn't able to be here to share his story. I am speaking on his behalf, and he thinks it's pretty cool. I told him I was talking today. But I will continue to advocate on his behalf until he and people like him are seen and heard and they get the help and services we desperately need for them. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, Erin. I just want to say, I know that was really hard and emotional, and we appreciate you sharing that story.
Yeah, Erin, that was very moving and powerful. And thank you for sharing. I can relate to that as well, in a sense where my mom's brother, my uncle, she had to care for him too, and she was stuck in that same situation. So I feel for you. Anyways, I want to thank those of you that shared your powerful stories. And anyways, with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and move to Doreen Vandevert on TEFRA waivers. But real quick, I just kind of want to, if it's okay, I'm going to share kind of the results for our second poll on your advocacy role. And it looks like parents took the lead with people with IDD right behind them. And then it's nice to see service providers and agency staff here as well. So thank you. And so take it away, Doreen.
Hey everyone, my name is Doreen Vanderfort. I'm mom to the fantastic Dimara, who's age 11, and we live in Pierce County, Washington. I'm here to talk about and hopefully help represent as well as possible the medically involved and medically complex and rare disorders population of folks in Washington state who are frequently denied access to waivers and DDA eligibility because of some of our rules and laws that leave them out. So TEFRA is a federal program that kind of birthed what we know now as our home and community-based waivers programs all across the nation. Some of us here might access a home and community-based waiver through DDA or through home and community services, but there isn't a waiver really available to those people that don't fit the strict criteria of DDA ages, 10 to 18 especially, but really 0 to 18. If you have a rare disorder and it's not considered and you don't have some kind of very good access to evaluation to get all the right things said in your evaluation reports, you're left out. And I have worked over the past few years to get my own daughter to remain eligible for DDA, and we're very lucky. And that's because I have a lot of privilege as a parent and as a person who's worked in this field for 20 years. To know who to talk to and how to get my doctors to write things in the right way. And most of the families and individuals that I work with in this state do not have the privileges that I have. So I'm here just continuing to advocate for this on behalf of all of the many families that I've talked to and worked with over the last 6 years. I'm trying to bring what we would call a TEFRA waiver or a Katie Beckett waiver to Washington state that would allow people to access home and community-based services and Medicaid through a waiver program that did not require DDA eligibility. This would be, the legislature did a report for this in October of 2020, which I think kind of quickly got swept up in all of the pandemic life and everything else. And we'd really like for them to implement TEFRA in Washington state and give us the demonstration waiver that was recommended by Home and Community and Healthcare Authority and the DDA staff that worked on that report, and give us this demonstration behavior waiver. I find it really distressing that the answer to our request for TEFRA is we don't know who's out there and we can't tell you how much it's going to cost. And that has been the response from agency and from legislature. So we count and we want to be counted. So our hope is that in offering a demonstration waiver, using these TEFRA funds outside of DDA eligibility, that we would allow for individuals who have behavioral health conditions, medical conditions, who perhaps are on the autism spectrum but don't meet the rigid criteria of DDA, but would meet a level of care in a care assessment, would be able to access services, and that we would begin to count those who are not counted or who have not been actively engaged by state systems. So I hope that was a good nutshell. I had to appeal DDA and fight for my own daughter's eligibility. And, you know, she's a wheelchair user with very complex care who ends up in the hospital frequently. So when I think about her care needs and the care needs of many of the other families that I have met in this journey, trying to advocate for TEFRA in the state, they are the folks who you see on the street and think, my tax dollars help pay for that person to get the supports that they need. And the truth is, we all know that's not necessarily a true statement. And so I want to just continue to share my story and advocate for that to continue. Thank you guys for your time today.
Hey, Doreen, this is Kyle. Nice to see you.
Kyle.
Could you remind people like myself again, what does an acronym TEFRA means? Because I know something has to do with an educational or residential deal, but I can't remember, and sometimes it will help.
It's actually a silly acronym. That's a Tax Equity and Federal Responsibility Act. So it's really a tax workaround rule that allowed people, that the federal government allowed us to use funds that would typically have gone to institutional services for home and community-based services. So when we talk about our home and community-based waivers, all of them kind of were created out of these TEFRA acts. There are 23 states that actively have TEFRA programs, either for medically involved or specifically for autism or behavioral support clients. There's also states who have chosen to implement a very low barrier access using the TEFRA rule, which means everyone who has a disability, according to the federal government, receives Medicaid services in their state. So there are many states that are choosing that. I would love to see that for Washington. In our initial advocacy, Stacy and I asked for that, and the response was, we'll do a study. And then the study resulted in this report, which said, we don't know how many people are there. We can't tell you how much it will cost, please. Can we do a demonstration? And so now we're just asking that hopefully they will follow through with that recommendation.
And just so everybody knows, this is Stacy, and we are working on a proviso that would direct the healthcare authority to follow through on the recommendation from this legislative report that Doreen mentioned. This report kind of got buried in the pandemic. It was in 2020. And we have urged the healthcare authority to make sure to keep it alive and to put it into their planning. That hasn't happened so far, but there were a lot of changes at the healthcare authority during the pandemic. So with the legislative directive, we're hopeful that HCA will follow through and create at least a pilot that would let in maybe 1,000 families who could start to buy in, and the state could begin then to calculate the cost and how it might work. And one of the things that Doreen and I have talked to legislators about is this is good for working families. They can buy into Medicaid and keep their jobs and their employer-based insurance. They could buy in on a sliding scale based on their income. And it would provide this safety net for families whose kids go in and out of the hospital and have extraordinary medical costs. So this is especially important for medically complex kids. And almost as importantly, as Doreen mentioned, for a lot of people who cannot make it through the DDA eligibility, but still have pretty significant needs. So we're excited about this. We're hopeful that we'll see a proviso in a couple of weeks But it doesn't hurt to know about it. Maybe mention to your legislators if you're one of those families that might be impacted by this.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Thanks, Doreen.
you so much. This is really incredible. And then for the states who have activated this, it's been a very successful model, hasn't it?
Very, yes.
Yes, very successful. And actually, they're finding it helps to reduce cost to states because families buy in as a secondary insurance, and they really offset a lot of the Medicaid costs to the state because they do also enroll in employer-based insurance, and the state ends up only paying those 20% copays.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we would like to go ahead and also introduce Ramona Hattendorf. She is with the ARC of King County, and she's going to be speaking about education. So please take it away, Ramona.
Hi. Can you guys hear me? I don't see myself on there.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I know a lot of staff members from the ARC are also registered as Ramona. So I think there's probably 5 of us, but I'm the Ramona you get to hear from. And I want to talk about special education or education. For you, if you don't know, there's a federal law called IDEA, Individuals with Education Act. And for kids who are up to age 3, they're eligible for something called early supports for infants and toddlers. And then when they get preschool age, they transition into special education services. And this year, a lot of advocates really want to work on making sure that kids are getting the support they need when they need it. And there are 2 aspects to that. One is around funding and fixing some funding problems. And there are also a few policy bills that people are trying to work on. I want to give you a super short overview of special education funding, because a lot of people don't understand how it works and why we need to fix it. I would say, I'm sorry, I don't realize my face wasn't on there. I would say school districts get something called a general apportionment. So every student in the district triggers funding for their school districts, and there's a formula. And so, if a school district has 20 kids, this formula is going to apply out, and it's going to be multiplied by the 20 kids, and this is how much money they get for general education. Issue 1, the amount they get per student varies from school district to school district. They don't all get the same. So a school district in say Bellevue School District will get a lot more money than Aberdeen. That's the way we've chosen to fund it. And that's because they tie that general apportionment to cost of living. It costs more to live in Bellevue, and they want to make sure that staff can afford to live in Bellevue or the region. And so they get more for staff salaries. But that means there's special education. If you're in Bellevue, you have more special education money. And that's because special education, everyone gets general ed. And then if you have a special education students, then they also trigger another funding allocation that school districts also get. But that's multiplied by that other formula. So say like the formula spits out, this school districts get $1,200 for general education, and this school district gets just $500, let's say, for general education. Well, for special ed, they're going to multiply it by that multiplier, and it changes. Let's say it's 1.2, but it can vary for different reasons. Your school districts that have a lot more money, that $1,200 are going to be multiplied, and then they're going to have that much more for special education money. Your school district that only has $500 because, say it's Aberdeen, it's a lower cost of living, that gets multiplied by, say, that 1.2, and they have a lesser amount of money. So that's problem 1 with how special education funding works, is that some school districts just get more because of the way our funding formula works. Another problem is that the state has decided to cap how many kids get funded. So they've kind of arbitrarily decided that no school district should have more than 13.5% of their student body should be qualifying for special education. So every special education student triggers funding up until 13.5%. So some school districts have 9%. I'm going to pick on Bellevue again, because they get a lot more funding for special education. They have about 9.5%. So they get all of their students get funded. Some other school districts might have, say, 17% or even 20%. Well, they only get funded up to 13.5%. And if you run the numbers, there are some really small school districts out there that get like $4,000 less per student with special education than our larger suburban and more wealthier school districts. So this is a real problem that a lot of people are working on. And the main asks are remove the cap, not just lift it, but get rid of it. And that is because the cap actually penalizes mostly small and rural school districts, and then school districts in high poverty areas. More than half of school districts are actually over 13.5%, and most of those are at students with 5,000 or less, or districts that have 5,000 or less students. So it's really a problem that's penalizing a very specific student body. So that's why we want to remove the cap, not just raise it, remove it. And then the other one is that the funding formula doesn't work in that it's not really covering actual costs. And school districts all over the state, large and small, even the ones that, like, I will say, hey, you're getting a lot of money, they'll say, yeah, but it's still not enough. So they want to fix the formula so that it aligns more with what the actual costs are. So that's a big ask with special education funding, is remove the cap and then fix the multiplier so that we're actually covering actual costs. And there's also something called a safety net. And so that covers like certain high cost situations that schools might have with special education. And there's always little things on tweaking that. And one of the problems with the safety net is that it can only be used for very specific things. And it also comes after the fact. So if you're a small rural school district with not a lot of money, you have to front all the costs and then get the money after the fact. And so not every school district can do that. So they want to fix special education funding. A couple other bills that you might want to know about. It's really hard for families to get through the process of developing an individualized education program. And there's a bill out there it's called Access to FAPE, or Free and Appropriate Public Education. And it wants to fix a few things involved in that process. And a big one is that if you are a parent and you disagree with a decision of the IEP and you go into something called due process, right now, all the burden is on the families to prove why that's not appropriate. And a big part of this bill is they want to make it that the school district would have the burden of proof. So they would have to demonstrate and persuade why it is important, why the placement is correct. So the school district has to defend why this is right, as opposed to the family having to prove why it's wrong. So there are other aspects of that bill too. They want to work on making sure that materials are translated or interpreted in time, making sure that if somebody needs an accommodation for one of these meetings to be recorded, that it actually happens. So that's a bill that really works on the IEP process. A bill that has not been dropped yet, but it's supposed to come this week or early next week, would eliminate the use of isolation in our schools. Unfortunately, most instances of restraint and isolation, more than 90%, actually happen in the K-5 years in elementary school. We're talking about young kids, and about 90%, 80-90% actually happen with kids with special education. So it's not only kids with disabilities that are restrained or isolated, but it's mostly kids with disabilities who are isolated, restrained, and a lot of them are actually in segregated special education classrooms. So it's not something just about general education. It's very definitely has special education stamped all over it. And there's a bill that would eliminate the use of isolation entirely. And what happens with isolation is sometimes kids are sent into a kind of like a small little cell, and that's where they are. In my community, there was a child who was placed in an outdoor area on the playground, but it was fenced off, and that's where this child got to spend their day. So there are some really sad stories around isolation, and restraint we're continuing to work on that. The same bill would eliminate things like chemical restraint. If you don't know, sometimes children have have medication that's prescribed on an as-needed basis. And what happens is that sometimes school staff will give them a lot of this medication to try to control them. And so they end up being very, very over-medicated. And even though they may not be locked down, they're restrained by chemicals. So they're restrained by the medication. So the bill would address that and a few other things. A smaller bill that some people might find impactful is one on safety on school bus. Sometimes things happen on school buses. People don't know about them. So it was actually first introduced last year. It's back this year. And I think it's mostly about putting cameras on the school bus so we can monitor them and make sure kids are safe. And I think hopefully I got to the main ones. I got FAPE, I got the cameras. Oh, and then also, if some of you had seen a story about, there's something called non-public agencies. Sometimes school districts can't serve a student. And so school districts will actually contract with a private school and the kids will go to that school instead. And those are called non-public agencies. And the quality is all over the board. Some of them seem to be really good and some of them seem to be not so good. And there was a story, I don't know, a couple months ago that really exposed some problems with some of these agencies around oversight. And so there's a bill that would also increase the oversight around OSBI and things like making sure they're finding out like how much they're also isolating and restraining. When the school district isolates or restrains a child, they have to document that. And some of these non-public agencies were not documenting that. And so there was practices happening there that were not in the best interests of children. So but it all gets back to fixing special education and really making sure that kids are able to access this. So working on that IEP process and working on the special education. And my final thing I would just really want to say is that, yes, it's actually important to remove the cap and not just raise it, because we know it is penalizing these small rural school districts and school districts in high poverty areas. They're the ones who are losing out on the funding. And it really hurts them. And that's it.
Thank you, Ramona. Yeah, Ramona's the education guru, I call her. But yeah, and I was looking at the chat and it sounds like Diana and Stacy had mentioned that House Bill 1436 was just introduced today. So that is very, very awesome and exciting. And then we're about like set 18 minutes kind of early. I did kind of want to ask Diana real quick. I'm concerned we might have accidentally skipped one person presenting on self-advocates on community inclusion. Did you want to give them a chance to let them speak, or I just wanted to make sure I'm not going over anybody or anything. I know we're early still, but whatever you want to do.
Whoops, that's not Ramona down there. That's one of the other Ramonas, I think. Okay, I need to try and figure out how to get rid of all of these in here. What I'm going to do right now, Taylor, is we're going to have Christina Brown talk, and she's going to talk about early education because we didn't quite catch all of that piece of it.
Okay, exciting, awesome. All right, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad I'm following Ramona because it actually dovetails really nicely what we're working on. So I'm Christina Brown. I'm the Director of Communications and Public Affairs at Kindering, which, if you don't know, is a nonprofit in Bellevue and Bothell and Renton and Redmond. And we serve mostly little kids with delays and disabilities. So we're working with other early support providers across the state this year on the other part of special ed. We are thrilled that there are advocates like you all and like OSPI that are making a big push this year for special education. You know, the improvements that Ramona described I believe are mostly for children 3 years old through 21 years old. But as she mentioned, special education starts from birth, or it can start from birth. And providers like Kindering offer those services to kids who would benefit from early supports birth to 3 years old. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but early supports can be really life-changing in a really huge positive way. 85% of brain growth takes place in the first 3 years of life. So it's a great time to give kids who may need supports access to things like, physical therapy or speech therapy or feeding therapy, or even just parental support. So, and all of that is included in special education for kids birth to 3. So the problem is that there is no investment in the governor's budget right now for our side of special ed for kids birth to 3. And our focus this year is making sure that when we're making this big push in special ed, we're not leaving behind the littlest kids with delays and disabilities. So we're working on a bill right now with Representative Sen. I should have a bill number to share with you all very shortly, fingers crossed, which would increase the multiplier for special education for kids birth to 3, just like others are doing for each other level of special education. We're essentially doing the same thing for kids birth to 3. We are asking the state for a significant increase in investment, in part because we have not had an increase in investment for a very long time. So we're asking for a 20% increase on our multiplier, which would be staggered over years, just like is happening for the 3 to 5 age group multiplier, and then for the 5 to 21 age group multiplier. We're also we're working on a very technical fix to a billing issue, but that I think it gets into the weeds. And so what I want to just leave you all with is if you are a parent, or if you have had early supports yourself, or if you're just passionate about making sure that kids with delays and disabilities get access to early supports, please be in touch with me, because I want to make sure that this issue rises to the top for legislators as well. And like I said, I'll share the bill number with you whenever I have it, but I'll just put my contact information in the general chat. And if you want to get in touch about how to support this, I would be very happy to work with you. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much, Christina. Thank you to all of our presenters. This has been really great, being able to hear from people who have some expertise in all these different areas. Children with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their parents and their families and their loved ones, their life is not isolated around one issue. There's a number of issues that affect their lives. And when this person goes into crisis, it's usually in this state because the system is in crisis. And that's what we fight for every day, is trying to get the services and supports that are needed to be funded and fully funded. And none of them have been, the home and community-based waivers, which there's not enough funding for people to get services through there. Special education, that's capped off, so that doesn't have enough funding either. We've got workforce issues. People are not getting paid enough to make them want to take the jobs. I mean, some of these jobs, like Scott talked about in supported living and other areas, when providers, they just got a raise last year and they're up to $20 an hour, but McDonald's pays $23 an hour now. And so most people are not going to say, yeah, I want to go work with people that are kind of challenging to work with for less money that I could just flip a burger for. So we have got to get wages up for our providers so that people with expertise and experience want to take those jobs. And for those who may not have that, we need to provide training to the people that are wanting to take those jobs so that they feel comfortable that they're going to be able to do what's best for that person and help them to be successful. I know that it just breaks my heart when I am working on like the notebook and different things where I see all this data about children and adults being taken away from their family, their home, their community, and shipped off to someplace out of state. We could use that money here. There's no reason to send them out. When you look at the amounts that they are paying to send a student in school, that a school district says we don't have the way to support them, and they send them out of state. Some of them cost $620,000 a year for one student. Can you imagine what we could do in our schools with $620,000, you know, times all these kids that are being sent out of state? And that's what we have to do. We have to tell these stories, the compelling stories, to legislators. Pull at their heartstrings, you know. They need to understand, because when they just look at the papers, they see numbers, you know. Oh yeah, here's this number that was sent to that state. Okay, that doesn't make the difference like hearing your stories. They really need to understand the experiences the individuals and families are going through. It's heartbreaking. And legislators are starting to listen. We have been having more meetings with legislators during the interim and this first part of the legislative session, with legislators that are really starting to care. They're hearing from people, they're hearing those stories, and they want to fix the problems. And they'll, you know, they're coming up with out of the box types of ideas. There was a hearing yesterday about a bill that would take, you know, when a millionaire or somebody that has a lot of money passes away in our state, they have to pay estate taxes on it. And the bill would take some of that money and put it into the DD community account. It won't fix all of our problems by any means, but at least it's a start, and they're looking for ways to do it when they're being told we can't put anything else in the budget. So keep up your advocacy. It is so important. And we are done a little bit early today, so I want to take some time. Taylor and Jen, could you maybe take some questions, and if the speakers are still here to answer them, have them do that?
Yes. Does anybody have any specific questions they'd like to ask any of our speakers, or any comments or concerns? I know the chat is blowing up, which is pretty exciting. So, but yeah, or yeah, if there's not, oh, I think I see Robert with his hand up. You want to speak, Robert?
I would want to, since I'm in the 29th district, I would love to talk to Conway and the three people about what you brought up, because I like what I'm hearing, and I think that if we don't do minimum wage hire for care providers and other stuff, I think that people will not know who's out there. Fine, well, thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
And it looks like we have a question in the chat. Can someone review what the reception would be like tonight?
Okay, do you want me to step in here for a second, Taylor?
Sure.
Okay. We've had statewide legislative reception for a long time, many years. Last year, you know, we've had to get creative during the COVID area, just because we couldn't meet in person like we used to. And last year, we set it up that it would be a reception where everybody joins, like we have here today for this afternoon for the briefing. And then we set up breakout rooms. And we did it by districts, legislative districts. And so there's 5 districts in each room. And that way, when you come into the meeting, there'll be a little bit of a welcome. Stacy and Brandy will be there to do a welcome. And then we'll just let everybody go to their breakout room that is their district. And when you get in there, there will be 2 co-facilitators in each room, a parent and a self-advocate, who will be there just to help guide people, make sure everybody gets a chance to talk. Legislators typically will kind of pop in and pop out. Some of them stay the whole time, but I know there are 2 committee hearings today at 4 o'clock, the Senate Ways and Means and House Appropriations. So the members of those committees will be done at 6 o'clock. And so there probably will be an uptick in legislators who join after 6 when they get done with their committee. But there are a number of other legislators. We've had quite a good response who have registered and intend to attend the event. And so when you can talk among yourselves when you're in your breakout room. The co-facilitators will, you know, have some ideas of things to talk about. And it could be a lot of these things you've heard about today that, you know, you want to make sure that when legislators come in that they hear that, especially if you have a story, a personal story about it. So just go and enjoy yourselves. It's very easy. There's no pressure attached to it or anything. If you want to speak, you can. If you don't feel like speaking, you just want to listen to what's going on, that's fine too. You just do whatever your comfort level. But it's just a good way for legislators. We got a lot of feedback last year that they really appreciated it. The actual in-person events that we used to do in the Columbia room, that room always got packed. And so wheelchair users would have a hard time getting around all the people in there. It was very noisy, so it was hard to even hear when you were trying to talk to your legislator. And by doing this virtually and having the breakout rooms, it's nice and quiet. You're not competing with a whole bunch of other noise, and you get some direct face-to-face time with your legislators. So I encourage you, all of you, to attend that tonight, even if it's just to listen and hear a little more maybe about what your legislators, because when they come in, they're going to let you know, well, this is what I'm doing, you know, because that's their job. They represent you, and they know developmental disabilities issues other than the new people. You know, we had a lot of new members in the House this year who aren't as familiar. And so they'll want to hear from you to understand what the issues are. And if you have legislators who have questions about any of the issues and you don't know the answers to them, you can always refer them to me and Stacy at the ARC or Brandy. And you can also send them to the ARC website. In fact, let me share my screen for a second here. And if they go to the ARC website, which is arcwa.org, hover over advocacy, and it will take them to a legislative notebook they can choose. And this is our notebook from this year, the 2023 legislative notebook. And there's lots of pages here that have information about a lot of these issues we've been talking about today. So they can find one-page information, so it's quick and easy for them. Or you can also click on these yourself, download them, and email them to your legislators and say, here's some more information about this issue. And there are charts and data also that have information about those issues. So you have lots of resources. You do not need to know all the answers. And it's okay to say, I don't really know all about it. I just know a little bit. But you could, talk to Katrina Davis and she can connect you with parents who've had to send their kids out of state. Or you can connect them with Scott Livengood so that he can let them know how much supported living needs in order to assist all these people that want to live in the community. Or if there's education issues, our guru, Ramona Hattendorf, you can send them to her and she can give them the information they'll be seeking. So it's okay to say, I don't know. You just tell them how much you do know. And most importantly, tell them your personal story. So are there any other questions? I want to make sure I know, like Julie and some of the others who have a hard time with getting their questions out there. We've used the chat at like Taylor said, it was blowing up there for a while. But we want to make sure that communication devices, people using those, have a chance to ask any questions they have. And I see Terry Hansen, you have a comment?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm Terry Hansen, and I am in a residential program, and what I see is that around the state is that there definitely needs to be more training for the staff members to maintain in-home care support. And also, one of the individuals that I've been working with for the last 6 years is not being supported in the way that the family should be. It's quite disturbing, the stories that have been told to me. They live in Skagit County at this point, but most of their providers do not speak English, or English is their second language. And some of them do not understand people with developmental disabilities at all. And so, on behalf of the family, I just want to put out there too that the training for some clients needs to be more individualized based, not in their not in the fact that they need to be bedridden for 18 to 20 hours a day, but just to get them out in the community is very challenging. So my suggestion is to give more options for families to have more supported living agencies who want to work directly with families and not work against them, because it's not something that it's not something that is feasible in America, is to let their clients not have the ability to be able to do more in the community, like physical therapy or have more opportunities in volunteering opportunities, because my client has basically been stuck at home and unable to do things, and her providers will not be able to help her because they're not trained properly.
Yeah,
And
training is a big issue that we've seen everywhere.
it is. And I've been dealing with this, Diana, for 6 years with this family, and I'm almost running out of energy, but I have to know that I'm advocating for them as well as other families in their condition or in their position, because I've seen their daughter very much declining because of her health and well-being, and it's just ridiculous. It's just something needs to be done, because unless it is put in their plan, they won't do anything. Like, to give you an example of one example of many others, is a simple action is helping someone push up in their chair because their muscles aren't strong enough. So
Well, Terry, there's a lot of speakers who have talked today, and maybe, some of them might have ideas that you could help with and work on their issues that they're dealing. Training is a huge one that affects all different parts of our lives. And I know we're running out of time now. It's almost 4 o'clock. So I want to give another shout out to Taylor. Taylor, you have just done an awesome job. You and Jen, I'm trying to find Jen here.
She's here.
There she is. Oops, wrong Jen. Sorry.
Thank you so much. This is like, I'm still new to this, and the fact that this is my second advocacy days and second year into legislation, I'm still learning, and I feel like I'm kind of learning all over again because this is a different year. While it's similar, I feel like I'm seeing a lot more bills being put on the table or policies being brought out there. So this is you know how to bring up challenges, Diana. So I appreciate that. I guess it'll keep me on my toes.
You're going to be one of our leading advocates here pretty soon. We're bringing up this younger generation of you guys.
Yes.
Yes.
It
Some
is
point
important.
I want to retire and you get to take over.
No, you are not, Diane. I'll make sure of that.
Yes, no, I like all the advocates. I'm so excited to see all the advocates here and just that so connect to me that I can relate to along with the parents here. I love that I can relate to those both worlds, just like Ivanova can. And it's really a pleasure to be here, and I feel very privileged to do this. And I really appreciate it, but I want to make sure no one else has any questions or comments. I just wanted to read. Oh, you do? Is it Tammy or?
I think that was Julie.
Julie. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
And so it's 4 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of time. Go get some dinner and then get back on your computer at 5:30.
Diane, really quickly, Diane. For those who don't know, make sure you double check your districts because some of them change.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike.
Times change for some people.
A very good point. And yeah, just make sure you check your districts. I know there'll be different like Diana said, there'll be different breakout rooms for a variety of districts that a bunch of our self-advocates and parents are going to be hosting. It's going to be fun, actually. I looked at the agenda and it looks like it's going to be exciting. Also, I want to reiterate to Cindy that so the 16th district is on there. You'll be in Debbie Chapman's and Courtney Tom's breakout room, I believe. I just wanted to get that out real quick. I'm trying to look at the chats as much as possible and address them, but boy, you guys are excited. You guys are an excited bunch.
And I'll be in District 12 helping somebody. So,
I'll be there as well to help and see what I can do.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you
I'm
for
in
your
the
help
32nd
too.
legislative district, which I think is in like room 4 or something. I don't know what room it is. We'll find out as soon as I get there.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Go get some dinner and we will do at 5:30.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.